Please welcome to the show, Master Astrologer Marvin Wilkerson. How's it going today?
It's going very well.
Absolute pleasure getting you on the show. I actually ended up getting connected through, I think it was your booker or somebody ended up contacting me, actually, and I ended up doing a little bit of research into what your work is exactly, and I found it absolutely fascinating, so I definitely figured I had to get you on the show for a conversation.
Okay, wonderful. I'm ready to converse.
So for anybody that may not be familiar with who you are, what you do exactly, why don't you let them know a little bit about your work and a little bit about what you do?
Well, I'm a evolutionary astrologer. I'm a master hypnotist. I'm a master neurolinguistic programmer and a lifelong metaphysician. So I've done a lot of spiritual studies, a lot of studies from the galactic relationships all the way into understanding quantum physics of the mind.
So where did it all kind of start for you as far as were you diving into like psychology and then you started getting into more of the spiritual realm, or were you more of a spiritual person who started connecting this in with a little bit more of like the scientific practice on it?
Well, now, when I was a young boy, 18 years old, I go home and my mother was doing a bunch of research at the time because she was dissatisfied with the church's answers. And so she was doing some exploration. And we started arguing about, what the Bible said compared to what she was reading. And she finally got fed up with me and said, threw a book at me, said, "Here, read this." And it was Think on These Things by Judah Krishnamurti. Very complex read for an 18-year-old, but it gave me a impetus to start thinking for myself because it's a book full of questions, and that's how he answers questions. He answers the questions with questions that makes you think. And growing up in Virginia Beach, it's a pretty large metaphysical community, and of course, it's the Edgar Cayce Foundation is there, which is which was a very very well known as the sleeping prophet. Um, and so I got into the astrology. Um, my first reading came from a an English astrologer that knew so much about me that I couldn't. I was in awe. I'd say, how can you possibly know all those things about me and you don't even know me? And so I started studying astrology, getting astrology readings, getting psychic readings, getting tarot card readings, um, just diving into the metaphysics. And of course, I studied a lot of the readings in the Edgar Cayce Foundation, which he has 14,000 readings and 8,000 of them is for medical purposes. So it's been a lifelong pursuit. It's well over 50 years that I have been studying all of the um, all of the metaphysical and spiritual understanding, and I just love going back as far as I can go back to um, teachers that were enlightened even long before Jesus Christ. um, Lazu and Buddha and um, Krishna. Uh, just I just fascinated by all the people that have said the same thing across generations, and that's how I come to understand truth and find my values in spiritual philosophies. Was when it's said three or four times across hundreds of years and all the way up to the present, how can you disregard it? And so I'm a big quote collector. 50,000 words in quotes, 60 pages worth of quotes from people down through history, all up until today's time. So that's pretty much how I got started and what I do. And so I've been doing astrology readings for well over 50 years. I've been doing them professional for well over 35 years. And and then one day I saw I saw I was reading a client, and I saw a lot of information or a lot of energy was in their subconscious uh, mind. And I said, you ought to get a regression. And of course, I was doing regression back in the 70s with all us hippies. So she says, well, where do you get one? And I said, well, I don't know. Somebody in Nashville ought to do them. And so she comes back to me and she says, well, I can't find anybody to do it. And I said, oh, heck, I'll do it. So I picked up a book called New Regression Therapy, and a guy out in Denver. And I thought, well, maybe they've learned something since I was doing it back in the day. And he said something about taking a hypnosis course, which that was a novel idea. So I took about 3 certification courses, about 500 hours of conflict courses, and that started me on the path in the career of utilizing hypnosis as in conjunction with astrology.
Say the subconscious is definitely one of the most fascinating parts of the mind, in my opinion, because I've been doing a lot of research lately into Carl Jung's Red Book, and just diving into like the subconscious and all these different archetypes that are reoccurring in the subconscious, and it's kind of like it mirrors almost kind of like the concept of astrology in the sense that there's these certain aspects of your personality that get shown through these specific archetypes. And if you actually understand the spiritual journey as you work through these things, then you're actually able to almost like prepare yourself for the next event that's going to come. But I don't know. I find it so fascinating as far as like the subconscious and the whole idea about how misunderstood it is, I guess, is a good way of putting it, because you can program the subconscious, which in turn will start to actually change your reality, which is when you get into the whole idea of mantras and everything like that. But on the other side, of course, it's also this massive memory bank for a lot of this stuff that you don't even realize that you memorize. And then all of a sudden it pops back up when you actually need it, or when certain conflict comes up, it pops up in a symbolic way that only you or certain people that really kind of understand how your subconscious works can really interpret it. But yeah, like I was kind of saying, like it's so fascinating, just like the subconscious and the connection with astrology, that a lot of people want to believe that it's in the woo woo, but if you actually start to understand these things and you actually understand how these things connect back in with like ancient philosophy such as Hermeticism, it's so fascinating that a lot of this stuff actually mirrors the way that nature works itself, which again is just a fascinating concept.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, agree with everything. I'll add that the subconscious mind is a million times more powerful than the conscious mind. The conscious mind houses the ego structure and the personality. How it houses the um, personal consciousness, which is the consciousness that allows you to see what is um, what you're capable of seeing and feeling comfortable with. Um, and then the conscious mind connects it. The physical connection is the body. And so when you're talking about the subconscious mind, what you're talking about there is the ability to create the reality that you choose by raising frequency and vibration. Um, the problem with the subconscious mind is when we're programmed and conditioned through language, then the ego structure takes that as um, the voice for you, for us all. And that voice, the ego does not allow you to be in error, because for you to be in error or wrong means that you are in a threat situation. So this is where a lot of conflicts occur. Is the conscious mind is not going to let you be wrong, so it'll disagree whether it's right or wrong with anything that it's confronted with. And this is where the subconscious mind can come in to find out, well, what program and condition are you using that then responds to that threat? And so when people I was just dealing with a client today. I mean, she was dealing with um, responding to a relationship or a person because of the way she wanted to borrow money from her boyfriend, and then she got really angry. And I said, "Well, why are you getting angry at a boyfriend that's giving money to a sister?" Well, it turns out that her family was very close knit and very careful around financial situations. And so she's brought that into her life. And I think she's around 34, 3, 5 years old. And so this is how she's responding to something and judging something that there's no reason for it, because now she's projecting into the future by what maybe might be could be if her and her boyfriend ultimately get married and then he's sloppy with money or loaning money to a sister. So you see how it unfolds. And it was so interesting how you tie that back into not even 5 sentences later, she says, "Well, my family and I are very close, and we support each other in doing everything and anything that we can." I said, "Oh, you mean it's like loaning money to somebody to buy a house?" And so, you see, so we use values and we use judgments and um, we use these things coming out of the programming and conditioning that we have been brought up with. You know, as hypnotists, we look at all major conflict. 95% of all major conflict is programmed before the age of 7. So that's pretty
Say
remarkable.
say it seems like most things, if you actually kind of understand the framework of how the mind works, you can kind of notice that you have these little like trigger buttons, as you were kind of mentioning that you don't typically have an issue with this, but when it comes to this particular person or this particular time, you start having this feeling that kind of pushes you back. But if you actually learn to kind of rework yourself back a little bit, you might even end up unlocking a memory that you didn't realize and actually be able to partially understand why your subconscious is programmed the way it is. And going on with with subconscious programming, one of the most fascinating things that I've been diving into lately is this whole idea about the law of polarity, where two different things exist that you think are polar opposites, but they're both existing on the same plane. They're just one is more of the other, one is less of the other. So this is one of the fascinating things when you're trying to reprogram things like this. I was hearing something recently about, if you're feeling anger towards something, the opposite of anger, as we would perceive it, would be passion. So you could turn anger into passion by just simply switching the poles opposite. So if you actually understand why your subconscious is programmed the way it is, then you could figure out what the opposite, or as you would view it as the opposite, but honestly just the polar of that particular emotion is, and possibly even be able to subconsciously reprogram yourself to start feeling the other emotion in response because they exist on the same pole.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're in a dual reality. And so that by nature is what we're supposed to be experiencing, polarity. It's when we get into judging one polarity or judging something as right or wrong that causes us the friction and the conflict, because everything we see in somebody else is within us. And this is what relationships are about, especially your most important ones, your intimate ones. Um, it's about reflection of what's going on inside of you is being externalized, so you have an opportunity to see what you're feeling, what's going on in you. And instead of blaming somebody else or blaming your partner for something, then you've got to look at it and say, well, that what's going on inside of me that's making this a negative or a judgment. And that's when you can start understanding polarity as what it is. I mean, I was teaching her, why are you judging something that's inside of you? You do the same thing. There, Now you can critique on what you like or what you dislike, but that doesn't mean you judge what you're looking at. And so you can decipher, well, this is my value, this is my boundary, this is what it's important to me. And in a relationship, that has to be an open discussion, which has to be 100% honest. And then now we're in the proper context of a relationship.
Say, and this is where you can start getting into even the ideas of the laws of like gender, for example, and laws of gender not being as what a lot of people would perceive, but just knowing that within every person there's masculine and there's feminine qualities, and in order to work in a balanced relationship, these things have to balance out. Meaning that there might be some more feminine qualities that the male in the relationship has that need to be balanced out with some of the masculine feminities that are the masculine qualities that the female has. But in turn, with trying to coexist and kind of find this balance, there might be a little bit of conflict as far as, you know, your male part wanting to take over these male dominant roles. But understanding the fact that, again, you carry both of these roles, when you're able to understand that, you're able to blend together a little bit better, and you're able to almost find that some of your weaknesses end up being some of their best positives, and some of their best positives maybe some of your best or some of your worst negatives. Even though it may not fit the gender roles that you think, it's still fitting within the male and or the masculine and the feminine within each ecosystem.
Well, the way I break it down is feelings versus thinking. Um, I work a lot with masculine, feminine because I get a lot of people in here that can be all in their head. And if you're all in your head, you're not using your heart and your feelings. Or if you're all in your emotions, you're not using your thinking. The feminine is a thinking, visualizing, imaging, dreaming power. So the feminine is about nurturing and fostering the growth towards an idea. Well, when it's turned over to the masculine is the leadership that goes to make it, gives it form, to make it happen, to create it. So it now brings the dream into form. And so we all have masculine, feminine within us, but there's a lot of time, a lot of occasion to where when you get all in your head, you cut off your feelings, and the only truth is feelings. Feelings and emotions are true. Your thinking mind is not true. It is 5% of your reality. And so when I'm dealing with that kind of thing, I've got to deal with helping people understand feelings are more important than anything else. Now, we have emotions by grace with love, joy, peace, and happiness. But then once you're through that, those qualities, now you're into a lot of emotional problems and conflicts that can bring on anxieties or all kinds of issues in your physical realm. So I like to deal with feelings as being stronger feminine and masculine being a stronger, a producer, a worker, a creator. And of course, sometimes I get women in here and I tell them, look, you're out manning a man. Sometimes I'll get men in here and say, look, where's the feminine side? Instead of, just being an aggressive and assertive person. So there's a lot of conflicts in there that you have to deal with, and it's basically it just boils down to be a misperception and misperspective about who we are, as well as programming and conditioning, because you may have a family that grew up with a strong matriarch or a strong patriarch. Well, then how do you think you're going to grow up? You grow up with a strong patriarch, well, you're going to grow up with a heavy-handedness in the male energies. And quite the polarity, if you grow up with very submissive, you could be growing up with a very strong feminine matriarch that gives in to the masculine. And so these are the kinds of conflicts and the problems that you can deal with in the subconscious mind, and well as the independence and individualism of who we are as individuals. And that really begins to really show up, especially in women around 40, and when they're trying to get their voice for the first time instead of just following orders.
Say this is where people forget about how important it is to be balanced, because a lot of the time people forget that the universe itself is mental and that everything must be created in the mind before it's created in reality. So in turn, again, you have to have a piece of a little bit of both in order to be able to create things into your reality. And the only way that reality is going to react the way that you want it to is if you create what you want to happen in front of you, meaning that, you know, the only way that people are going to treat you a certain way is if you allow people to treat you that certain way. The only way that you're not going to have confidence is if you don't allow yourself to have confidence, which goes back around to this whole idea about programming the subconscious mind, or at least trying to understand the dark aspects of the mind to be able to at least try to understand why you feel the way you do, take a moment to understand things, and then again use the feminine for that aspect, and then push it into the masculine and actually take action from understanding the subconscious and creating it in the subconscious.
Yeah, and I mean, the first chapter of my book, I tried to bring forth the whole concept and idea of the Hermetic principle: all is mind. We're making it all up, everything. So if all is mind, then that lends itself to understand the power of creativity is within your mind. And your attraction principle and your creative principle is just simply of how you manifest frequency and vibration of that mind concept. And when you match the frequency, well, then you attract the principle. And so this is how it actually, we are co-creators of life because it's in our mind to do so.
And I guess this might even kind of get into possibly some of your like hypnotism work, because when you start really breaking down the mind and the certain frequencies that the mind gives off when it's in certain states, then of course that's when you can start getting into how you could program the mind or how you can start to push the mind into a more positive state. But I'm assuming, of course, getting into this more hypnotic idea of things, a lot of people that don't really get into this whole idea of psychology, a lot of the time want to believe that it's this woo-woo concept, but a lot of this new age stuff is starting to link in a lot with new age science, as far as this whole idea of vibrations, frequencies, rhythms being pushed onto the mind. So when you actually start to understand this whole idea of vibration, frequency, and rhythm, and you start to understand, for example, like theta waves, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's what the state that you have to push people down into in order to push them into hypnotism, then a lot of these woo-woo concepts that have been looked at as new age start actually making sense in this I guess you could say, new age psychology movement.
Yeah, I mean, Einstein said all is energy. All is energy. That's all there is to it. And so if everything is energy, then your job is to stay in balance, stay in center, stay positive, stay in a proper frame of mind, raise your vibration through things like meditation, like exercise, like any number of things that we do nowadays that can raise our vibration. Eat right. All of this stuff has to do with our frequency and vibration. And so it's a hard sell to get people to understand that all they have to do, everything is always around you. Anything that you could possibly want is in your auric field. And so if you raise your energy, vibration, and frequency, it will come into manifestation. And that's all there is to it.
getting into, I guess you could say, I don't even want to necessarily call it woo-woo, but I've been diving into this whole idea about higher dimensions. And it seems like when you really start diving into this whole idea of higher dimensions, you really start getting into the whole idea of the occult, and you start getting into this whole thing with there being 11 different planes, and you start getting into the whole ideas of there being 11 different dimensions. So when you start getting into this whole idea about being able to manipulate, I guess you could say, like our environment through energy, I feel like this is where you start getting into more of these like fourth dimensional and a little bit more scientific concepts, where you start talking about this idea that the reality below or above each reality can manipulate the reality below it. So if you're able to elevate your frequency into this fourth reality dimension, then in turn you're able to manipulate the third reality dimension. But it's kind of a weird thing to think about, that we seem to be these beings that exist within all these planes, but our focus, and it seems to be within this third dimension parallel. But this is, I guess, where you kind of get into the whole idea of reincarnation, or a lot of the weirder aspects of philosophy as far as the afterlife, on whether or not you elevate to a different plane, you keep reoccurring until you go through a new lesson. But I almost kind of wonder if it's a matter of continuously building up until you're able to carry enough knowledge to be able to understand the next dimension up. But I kind of want to get some of your thoughts on all this stuff, if you've dived into the different aspects of like parallel dimensions and different dimensions.
Well, the point to the third dimension is polarities are how we learn. If time is separated, if time happens in a linear fashion, we can learn from it. Now, when you get into higher dimensions, fifth dimensions and above, everything is instantaneous. All you have to do is have a thought and it's instantaneous. It's there. So the way that the easiest way to look at it and take it out of the occult, take it out of the philosophy, is to understand why we're here. We're here for self-realization, to understand we all are the manifestation of our maker, which is universal consciousness. Now, in hypnosis, we call it quantum hypnosis healing. And what that is when you can go so far out that you lose your sense of separateness and identity with universal consciousness. And you identify with that universal consciousness. At that point, there is perfection, and nothing can be in that point that isn't purified. So you can heal disease, you can heal illness. And this is why this isn't metaphysics, occult, or anything. This is quantum reality. I mean, it's factual. It's all connected. We are all connected all across the whole universe to everything. And so when we can utilize this quantum reality to now heal our lives, that's a big deal. And it is a place that, that's the last chapter in my book, Quantum Healing. And that's soul fusion. So when the soul fuses with the universal consciousness, that's healing. Nope, I don't care what's the matter. It's perfect. It's perfection. The universe is perfection at any moment in time.
This has been kind of a bizarre trail that I've been onto lately, but kind of starting to dive, or I've been diving into a lot of different like philosophies and religions for a long time. And I recently started putting together an episode for my other show about Hermeticism. And I really started connecting in a lot of the dots, that it seems like a lot of these people that were a lot of the really important characters through a lot of different religions all seem to have these principles dating back to ancient Egypt, and almost getting into like Hermeticism. And that gets into this whole idea of even like healing, that, you know, you hear about like Jesus, for example, or Moses, who had this ability to, you know, part the Red Sea, or all of these different like characters that you hear about through all the different religious texts. Again, they all would have been somewhat familiar with Hermeticism. They would have been familiar with these different concepts on how to manipulate the reality inside and outside, and how to possibly even heal things. So as far as having an understanding of this to like a master ability, like I think it's almost potentially possible that you can essentially heal things and move things within our reality once you start understanding on a higher reality. And that a lot of these ancient texts, a lot of these older religions, if you really start dating them back, it actually seems to almost go into this understanding of people understanding ancient occults and ancient hermeticism, which weirdly enough goes into new age scientific concepts, which are, you know, essentially that every single thing is in vibration, everything single thing is made of these little particles and everything. And it's weird once you start understanding this stuff. I almost wonder if it is possible to manipulate things to the extent that people used to be able to do back in the day.
Why not? I mean, why not? You're just as much. You can be just as much realized as Jesus Christ. What I am, you shall be. Ye are
See, the
all
hardest thing
gods.
with this, I think, is also belief, too, because it
Why,
seems like with a
certainly.
lot of this stuff, you know, it's of course that reality reacts with how you perceive it to react. This is when you start getting into, for example, like the double slit experiment. So, you know, if you live in a time where everybody believes that this person has the ability to heal people, there's all of this, I don't want to say placebo effect, but almost like mind power to manipulate reality put on this idea. Where, like in present day, again, not saying that it's not possible, but imagine the power you'd have with all these people focusing on you back in the day versus now, where even the people that want to believe still have this doubt in their mind, where back in the day, people had no doubt in their mind and they were seeing these things happen. I feel like a lot of it, again, was this mind manifestation of people believing that this was going to happen in their reality.
Well, let's think about that for a second. I mean, if you're standing next to a master, a self realized master, that frequency and vibration alone is enough to affect you. I use the metaphor for what did Jesus say when he healed somebody? He said, go, your faith has healed you. So you stand next to a master, you understand that vibration, you heal yourself. Nobody heals anything for you. You heal you. And of course, I believe in the science of mind. The greater sin is to lift the burden from the one that's supposed to carry it off their shoulders. We are all responsible for every single thing that happens in our life. So there's nobody going to come into your life and take that away from you. I mean, there's few among us that knows why you are creating what you're creating for your soul, for your purpose in life. And so that has to be of paramount to understand that you are not healed by somebody. You have, if ye are all gods, well, then you have the ability to heal your own life. And if you have the ability to heal your own life, it's no different than you have the ability to create whatever you choose once you achieve that state. Because up until that state, you do not have free will. You are operating on the soul group to be creative. And when you're operating in the soul group, you've got soul group desire. And that soul is delivering that to you so you can experience specific experiences. So for you to learn where you have been in error, where you have a error in your perspective and perception throughout other lifetimes as well as this lifetime. So I kind of look at it from that perspective is that just being in the presence, and we've all been in the presence that when we're studying these kinds of things of somebody that is very powerful. Um, you can feel their energy. I mean, one of my greatest reads was Yogananda. I mean, Yogananda was an amazing man, and he learned from Sri Yukteswar. And I mean, it just goes on and on and on, where these great masters have learned from other masters, but then they've done what my teacher taught me. He said, Marvin, walk the talk or throw it away. And that's the way I live. So I live my philosophy. I live my beliefs, and they're always up for to be double checked from now and then.
True that. I mean, it's definitely one of the hard parts when you start getting into this philosophy about this stuff that, it can be used in such a powerful way, but on the other side, it can also be manipulated in such a powerful way. So you often wonder, it's like, why can't everybody have this type of knowledge? And this is where this hard back and forth goes, where even looking at possibly even like the biblical narrative that, if everybody had this knowledge, then that was going to be a problem. So that's one perspective. And then you have this perspective of Jesus actually trying to give the knowledge of to people that they can heal themselves. They can do all of this type of stuff. So, of course, that knowledge would need to be suppressed from that evil power, of course, that doesn't want everybody to know that. But then again, it's such a hard contradiction because on the other side, if there is evil people that know that you can do this type of stuff, then of course they're going to manipulate reality into what they perceive it to want to be, which is when you start getting into this like dark occult stuff about programming, like the subconscious and all this different stuff happening in our reality. But again, it's such a hard conversation on whether or not all of this should be made public to people because it can be used either way, but it can be so powerful when it is used in the proper way.
Well, I come from the context that when you are consumed with power and control, there is no light. You don't have the understanding of love and light, and this is what destroyed Atlantis. They wanted to create powerful individualism. Well, there was another section that wanted to create powerful great societies. So when you want to create powerful individualism, well, you, sir, are not in alignment with universal consciousness. So you're creating a personal consciousness that is consumed with power, greed, authority over others, and so on. So I would take exception to the fact that these people are aware of their power, other than the power comes through false securities. Like in this day and age, it's obviously money. You give me $1 billion, and I think I can do anything and get away with anything. And so these are all false pretenses.
It's unfortunate that the occult has been made to look out to be so evil because, of course, you have people like Hermes Trismegistus. When you really start looking into like the text talking about not using any of this type of stuff for any type of evil, but then of course people have misconstrued those words and made it completely look like evil. But I guess that's within the context, of course, that if you make it look like it's evil, people aren't going to dive into it and they'll leave it alone. They'll leave it alone to your powers that be to do what you want. But it's such a weird thing to think about that both sides are essentially using the same philosophy. It's just used for a good side and it's used for a bad side because, like we were kind of mentioning earlier, everything exists on a pole. It's not one thing or necessarily the other. It just has one more of one thing or less of another thing, kind of shifting both ways. But again, this philosophy, whether it's being looked at as the evil satanic occult or as the positive new age stuff, it's all being looked at as evil occult, even though it's mainly just because people don't honestly have an understanding of what the root of the text actually is when you start actually diving into, again, Hermes Trismegistus and some of the ancient texts.
Well, exactly. And this is the deal. When you say occult, um, uh, I like Alice Bailey. She says that the mystic deals with the evolving life. The occultist deals with the form. The mystic deals with the God within us. The occultist will deal with God in outer manifestations. The mystic works from the center to the periphery. The occultist reverses the process. So I think that you're not just saying occultism, you're also saying mysticism, which has got to be a root word of mystery somewhere. and when you're wanting power and you're wanting to control the masses, you're wanting to be mysterious. You're wanting to be occultist. So you're trying to form your own philosophy that gives you the power and the construct and brings fear into people so that they don't trust themselves. And that's where it gets all out of kilter, is when we don't trust ourselves. And so I think this is what mysticism or occultism, that's what it's about. Learning who we truly are. Remember what I say. You're here for self-realization. When you realize who you really truly are. I get these clients that come in and sometimes they say, why are all these bad things happening to me? I meditate 3-4 hours a day. I really try to be a good metaphysician. And I say, well, how about you just trying to be a human? You're already spiritual. So just be a human. If you're just a human, the spiritual side is enough to lead you into self realization. And so I think that this is where we get caught up in the word occultism or mysticism, is that, it's kind of anti religion or anti belief or anti mythology. And there's no negative in any of it. I mean, I don't think there's negative in religion. You can take any religion you want if you will live that religion, walk that religion, and value that religion. I think you'd probably be a pretty good person, whether it's Christian, whether it's Buddhist, whether it's Muhammad. I don't care what it is, but most vast religions, all is one, and that pretty much says it all.
Well, this is kind of a thing to think about. So as far as like looking at it, at least from the Christian paradigm, you have this viewpoint with the occultist, and I guess you could say like the Christian viewpoint of this knowledge that was, the knowledge that was given from Lucifer and from the fallen angels to everybody, which of course seems to be like this knowledge of manipulating the system. But you start getting into this idea in the occult, which is what I wanted to kind of reflect it towards. That when you start really diving into quote the occult or hermeticism, they start talking about this whole idea of like the matrix idea. That when you start actually learning how to quote break the matrix, there's going to be these like defense mechanisms that start happening. So you're going to have these bad things that start happening in your life. You're going to have these bad things that start trying to interact and push back towards you. I think this is a matter of trying to control it, which is a matter of getting more knowledge than what you're supposed to have at the current time that you're supposed to have it, which is what I was kind of mirroring with like the Christian aspect of things. That, when you look at it from that standpoint, the occultists, they wanted all this knowledge at once. It's not that we're not supposed to have this knowledge. It's just that we're supposed to acquire this knowledge as we get to the point where we're able to understand this knowledge and not use it in a negative way. So when you actually start, again, understanding how this is supposed to function as far as the quest for knowledge, when you start diving too far into the occult and you start noticing that these bad things happen to you, maybe you need to step back a little bit because you're pushing into the aspect of trying to control reality. And when you actually start trying to, quote, control reality, there is going to be defense mechanisms that take place back towards you.
Well, I look at it, we have a planet in the sky called Neptune. Neptune is the universe. And it's just like when you have dreams, if you have bad dreams, well, because you're making a judgment that they're bad. Everything is in the universal consciousness, whether you call it good or bad or indifferent, whatever you call it, it's all there. Your job is to choose. Your job is to reflect intention. What's in your heart? That truly is all that your maker is looking at is your intention. If your intention is to help people, to be supportive of people, to love, to express joy, those are high vibrations. Then obviously you can easily be privy to information that's positive, that's true, that can facilitate your growth as well as anybody else's. Now, if you're trying to use if you're using bad intentions that go along with pride and go along with self empowerment, Well, then obviously, I don't think you ever really get clarity on truth and what truth is. And so I think that you're choosing what you choose is can be painful. And that's where I think that those choices always end up in pain.
So this is going to get, I guess, super deep as far as I'm assuming that you've probably dived into the whole aspect of like 11th dimensional beings, and they start getting
Mm-hmm.
into this whole aspect of chaos. What looks like chaos to us is completely organized to them, meaning that if you throw down a glass and completely shatter it, it looks like complete chaos to you. But to an 11th dimensional being that knows the exact place that it was dropped, where every single exact piece is going to go, the exact amount of force that need to get dropped on it, you start getting into this idea that everything that looks like chaos might actually be organized. And then when you start breaking that down even further, you start getting into the idea about free will and the aspect that everything in reality might function as it's supposed to because it has a broader picture or a grander function. So it kind of makes you curious if, not to get too nihilistic about things, but do we even have free will in the first place? Or is everybody's spiritual journey intended to be what it is at the time that it's happening? Because even if it looks like somebody has a negative spiritual journey, it might be pushing somebody else into a positive path, which later on that person might get bumped back up. But again, it's not a matter of the choices you make necessarily. Everything is going to happen as it's supposed to. And again, this is such a weird concept, but it seems like if you get into the whole idea about 11th dimensional beings, it could possibly even take the whole idea of free will out of the picture.
Well, this is the deal. I have long been in the understanding that there is no free will. You got two things that are free will. You got the free will to have an attitude about anything you want. You can have a good attitude or you can have a bad attitude. And then you got the free will to use your creativity when confronted with anything in life. Otherwise, you don't have any free will. Your desire comes from your soul. You don't have free will of desire. You don't have the you are highly connected to your soul group. So it's not important. And people have a hard time with saying, you don't have free will. I mean, I know you have heard the concept of living in a um, uh, what's the word that I'm looking for? Living in a
Like a soul trap.
no. Uh, Now is running from me. Living in um, a situation where everything is already mapped out. Everything is already here. So you're just living in that paradigm that gives you an opportunity and gives everybody an opportunity to learn specific lessons specific to them. And so ultimate reality is already laid out. Everything Einstein said, um, everything is already determined. Every beginning and ending by forces over which we have no control. It is determined for the insect as well as the star, human beings, vegetables, cosmic dust. We all dance to a mysterious tune, intoned in the distance by an invisible piper. Now, that's a heck of a concept. And if you accept that concept, well, then you're living in a situation that's already mapped out. It's already here. It's already your life is laid out before you even get here. The people you are supposed to be with, meet, everything, all the way down to the final breath. And that's approved by you, your angels, your guides, your teachers, and your soul. So it's so as we start looking into quantum physics and studying the connectedness to everything, now we start to really understand how we are living within that scope of uh, of a particular uh, universe.
Say it brings some kind of function to it, because it almost kind of seems like no matter what philosophy you get into, no matter what practice you get into, you almost start getting in, no matter what, you get into this concept that there is some type of grand architect to everything. And in turn with that, again, you get into this whole aspect of free will. And kind of like you were mentioning, like, I don't think it's necessarily that, you know, you get to pick which path fully that you're going to happen, but there's two different ways that you can go to the same road. Like, these certain events are going to happen no matter what, but there might be two different paths that link up to this same exact road. So that's where the illusion of free choice comes in, is that you think you have the option to pick between this choice and this choice, but at the end they both end up resulting back into the same place. It's just two different ways of getting to that same function, which is something that, again, is mapped out by this broader architect of the grand scheme of the universe. Because, again, you look into just simply looking at Earth, for example, and the fact that there's been so many different things that have flown by. Nothing has smashed into Earth and cosmically destroyed it that we know of in semi-recent time. Like, there's this grand architect that has a way for things to work. Otherwise, every other planet in our solar system is constantly getting blasted by all of this other different stuff. Like, there's a grand scheme function to everything, and it looks like complete chaos, but again, from that broader perspective, it is all completely organized, and every single thing completely makes sense, and every single little piece is a little tiny cog, like in a Swiss clock, that if every single piece doesn't function completely properly, the universe as itself wouldn't be able to function properly. But again, if it doesn't make sense to you and you don't know what you're looking at, it looks like complete and utter chaos.
Yeah, I mean, that's look. If we made free choice on how we wanted to live in this life, why would we ever choose things that were in pain? Why would we ever choose things that were that felt negative? We wouldn't. But we grow from pain. We go from conflict. We grow from a lot of things that we would just as soon avoid. So that's why what you're saying is right. I mean, you can try and avoid it by having a good attitude or a bad attitude, by trying to not face it, but ultimately you are going to face it. And you're going to have to face it, and you're going to have to learn and grow from it. Or you're going to face it again at some point. So you're not going to ever escape it.
See, that's what a lot of people don't seem to actually understand when you're going through a hard situation, is that, again, if you look at this whole broader scheme picture, you know, something may look like it's bad happening right now, but there might be something that kicks into action later on that you may not have understood. Just simply even looking at something like, you know, you end up losing a job, or you end up breaking up with somebody in a relationship. It looks like it's one of the worst things that could ever possibly happen, but because now that opportunity freed up, it now opens up this other opportunity that this new thing comes in, which starts to get into this whole thing, that getting back into the occult, the whole idea about like the law of rhythm, for example, that if you actually understand the fact that, you know, you're going to have peaks, you're going to have lows, you're going to have ups, you're going to have downs, and that's the balance of things, and you wouldn't be able to fully experience the highs and the lows without each other, then, you know, that's where it kind of comes back around. You need all experiences in order to appreciate all experiences, because if you have too much of a good thing, then it just becomes neutral and it's not enjoyable anymore.
Well, and I mean, that's exactly right. So, I mean, what you're trying to accomplish is enjoy everything that you're faced with. In other words, if you have a conflict, well, then enjoy it. Um, know that you're going to learn from it. The absolute, the equation to life is live your excitement, follow your passion, and let go of the outcome. You're not in charge of the outcome. So live your excitement. When you talked about Satan earlier, well, that's an archangel that's just meant to try to connect you to the material world. So he works to make you to make this material world the universe. And as long as you're attracted to the material world, well, then the devil is with you. But when you understand that love and joy and peace is in an internal concept, we are all light beings. When you transition, everything you think of is immediate. So, this is why you're getting an opportunity down here to learn and grow from this linear time, this polarity, this duality. And so enjoy everything and just look at everything as an opportunity. And that includes illness and disease. I mean, people think that that's a tragedy. It's not a tragedy, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to heal yourself. It's an opportunity to go through the process. And I think that if people, when people come to understand that, I think that it's an Aquarian principle. And that's why I've talked a lot about the Aquarian paradigm in my book. I mean, where we're headed out of the chaos that we are currently in is into a whole new paradigm to where humanity is going to be increased in consciousness and awareness of other things that are around us and available to us through consciousness that we think is occult, or we think is mysticism, or we think that is paranormal or unreal. And none of that is true. Because, like you say, it's all in the mind, and the mind is getting ready to grow and expand exponentially. And we're going to grow and expand as a humanitarianism, as a society where people care for other people. And I think that that's where this is the breakdown of what we're going through in this country is breaking down the old materialistic fashion, the inequality, the all the evil things that we've done as a society for 250 years. I mean, there's karmic to be paid for that, and it's a positive because it's going to give us an opportunity to now reshape this society, culture, into a much more in alignment with universal consciousness and a higher way of perceiving things in life. I mean, if you study the galactic families, you'll understand that a lot of those galactic families have already been through what we're going through. So they offer insight into how we are evolving and transforming as individuals and people, and as a collective and individual. So we're actually, I mean, we're in one of the most opportune times in all of our history.
It's almost
And
like we're go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's almost kind of like the idea of the phoenix that, we must burn away our past in order to re-emerge as something brighter and newer.
Right. We're burning away the eagle to become the phoenix.
Exactly.
From the scorpion to the eagle to the phoenix. That's the death and rebirth process. So yeah, I mean, and I think that if we would just to see everything as an opportunity, then we can take a positive attitude towards it and grow from it, grow from the experience, grow from a new perspective and perception that gives us freedom, that gives us individuality, that gives everybody equality, freedom, and individuality, so that we now live in a lot more harmony and peace. I mean, when you start studying some of these galactic beings, you're thinking, "Oh my goodness, how wonderful is that?" And we've got them. We've got them among us. I know you've looked at some of Bashar. Well, there's been Seth, there's been Bashar, there's been Abraham Hicks. I mean, these people are channeling those dimensions that you've been talking about. And it's it's just so. I guess I would like to describe it from a feeling instead of a head point. It just feels like you're eating the most wonderful chocolate cake or dessert you've ever had in your life. And that's what it feels like when you understand that these cosmic beings or different dimensional beings can really understand and articulate all the different particles in this universe that are not separate, that are always available to us. But yet we've got to grow and evolve to become part of that understanding. And that's where we're at.
Break away from materialism, stop fighting each other, stop warring with each other, break away from all this stuff, because that's the only way that we'll ever be able to break away and exist that way as a society, unfortunately.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it seems
Stop
like the
killing
majority
people.
of us are on that path, but the powers that be keep trying to fight against it, but you can't let them program your subconscious, because we all know that, we're all pushing against it, because we're all elevating to a higher vibration, even though they're trying
Well,
to push us down against it.
yeah, they're just leading the conscious mind, your ego. That's all they're leading. I mean, not the subconscious. They're leading your ego mind, because the conscious mind, the subconscious mind follows the orders of the conscious mind, and it doesn't. The subconscious mind doesn't make anything right or wrong. It follows your conscious mind. So if your conscious mind says that's black, well, as far as the subconscious goes, it's black.
Like I said, you got to understand the programming and try to actually break away from it. Because a lot of the time,
Yeah.
again, people are scared to dive into this stuff. But the reason why is because they don't want you to understand their tactics. Because if you understand how the tactics work, then you can actually use them in the proper way that they're intended to by the people who actually discovered and tried to bestow this knowledge. Because again,
Well,
if people
yeah.
dive into Hermes Trismegistus, Thoth, the whole idea from all of this, it supposedly came from the Atlanteans, who, of course, their society broke down, and they were trying to give this knowledge in order to reestablish a new society that wouldn't make the same mistakes. So, with the knowledge of that, hopefully we will learn from our history and not make the same mistakes again.
I was listening to something the other day that really kind of rang true. And with this cultural breakdown, we're all in the we're coming from the karmic background of the Egyptians. Some of us are coming from the Atlanteans. Some of us are coming from various different time periods into this time period to go through this experience. I mean, you got the Mayans, you've got so many cultures that have attempted to uh, ascend and have achieved certain limitations, and then we've spawned off of them. But we've all got karma somewhere at some time in the past that we are now experiencing, going through this violence, this ugliness, this. I mean, you could just go on and on. I mean, the crime, the murder. I mean, we literally murdered a whole society to build this country of the Native Americans. So, I mean, I don't know how you would argue against that. Manifest destiny is probably about the worst dang thing there is on the whole planet, that whole concept. And when you go back to the third century of the Emperor Constantine and understand why he and all of the religious leaders at the time rewrote the Bible that you read today. That is gives all power and control to Emperor Constantine because he wanted to control the masses. So much of it, that's where they deified Jesus. He wasn't a deity. He was a human being, just like you and me. But he was awakened. He was aware. And that's what gave him the power in his mind to do all the things that seemingly to the average person as miracles.
See, I kind of wonder sometimes too, just kind of leave on hopefully an end thought here. when you get into the whole idea about the Holy Trinity, I often wonder if this could possibly be a description of a fourth dimensional being, or trying to explain a fourth dimensional being's perspective. Because when you get into the Son being Jesus, being in the third dimensional plane, you get into the Father being this ethereal thing that exists somewhere else, and then you get into the Holy Spirit, which seems to be this thing that exists amongst every single thing. It seems like you're almost describing a fourth dimensional being. So, if Jesus, for example, was one of the people that realized that he was able to connect with his fourth dimensional self, then this could possibly be where a lot of this thought and philosophy comes in. And basically what we're kind of talking about a little bit earlier, that a lot of it has been misconstrued for the intention of being able to keep the power for yourself.
Well, it was interesting. Edgar Casey, and I'm sure you're familiar with him. He said in his story of Jesus that Jesus actually lived 32 lifetimes, and it's the shortest amount of lifetimes to come to full blown universal consciousness and awareness. 32. So I'll give you what Yogananda said. Yogananda said, how many lifetimes, if you take a lake and a bird picks up a beak of water, flies 1 mile and drops it into another hole, how many lifetimes you've lived is how many times it would take him to fly back and forth to empty that lake. Now, that's a lot of lifetimes. And I mean, the other thing is people just assume that you're always coming back as a human. Well, that ain't true at all either. we got multitude of options as light beings. And so, so there's a lot of misconstrued concepts and ways of thinking about things that kind of pigeonhole us into being, um, you know, a philosophy that's just a small box. It's too small. We are universal light beings that are capable of multitudes of learning, going all over the universe to do things, experience things of our own choosing. So there's so much freedom in being who we are. Now, is the freedom on the third dimension reality? Not really. But is it in the other realities when we pass? Pretty much.
I mean,
And if
even the
you
whole
was
concept of past lives, I mean, from our perspective, linearly, it looks like past lives, but that whole concept doesn't mean that you're necessarily always going to the past. You could have had a life that, from your viewpoint, chronologically may have been your past life, but it could have been at a point in the future, which is a really, really weird thing to think about when you actually start breaking down the concept that time only exists within our dimension.
well, time only exists in the now. There is no time. We've made that up.
Exactly. It's a human concept. Yep.
So I mean, basically, all is now. All your past lives, all your future lives, they're all now. And if you get in, when I've taken people into hypnosis, I mean, regression therapy does it all the time. So you go into a regression, where's all that coming from that's in your subconscious mind? You can say, well, you're making it up. Well, you can't make nothing up that you haven't experienced. So, and I've proven that to myself many times with, over with lots of clients. I had somebody that says, oh, I can't remember being in a car wreck. Well, 3 of my buddies died. And so I took him back into that whole experience, and he got to a place to where he couldn't see himself getting in a car. I said, well, you know how to get in a car, so make it up. So he started making it up. And guess what? I led him all the way to being in the accident, seeing what the driver was doing before the accident, and then hearing the ambulance coming, and then seeing his friends lying dead beside him. Now, you don't just arbitrarily make that up.
I mean, another prime example of that is, even just the subconscious memories that are linked to particular things. And I know that everybody's experienced this. Like, you'll walk past something and smell a particular smell, or you'll see a particular like design or something like that, and all of a sudden it'll spark up this memory that you didn't even know you had. That was like, a time when you were sitting in the crib, for example, or a time when you were, walking down the hallway when your parents were asleep, and you were like before when you could typically have memory of these typical things. Like, there's so much programmed into the subconscious that you don't even realize that you're having regular experiences with some of this stuff popping up, and people just kind of throw it off and don't even realize what it is.
I had a person. Well, actually, I'm training her to be a hypnotist. But I said, well, you can be in a past life right now. And she looked at me kind of cross-eyed and, like in disbelief. I said, can't you see yourself in an old French dress? And she thought for a second. She says, yeah. I said, well, that's because you had a lifetime there. So, I mean, you can prove this stuff over and over and over. And I mean, when you stop and think about it, and all you got to do sometimes is just ask. If you ask, you can get the truth. It'll be given to you from your guides and your teachers. So that's all you got to do. I tell spiritual people, don't keep it in your head when you want to know something. Ask out loud. Ask your
This
teachers.
is a typical concept you see through everything, whether it's Christianity, spiritualism,
Yes.
no matter what it is. This common concept of don't just think things, but speak them out into fruition. Say them out loud. Like, this is something that you see across every single item of philosophy.
Yes. The word, when the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. I mean, come on. Use your freaking words, will you?
Hey, this is what we were talking about earlier. You have to think about it and then actually act upon it to create it into reality. So if you're not actually saying these things out loud, nobody knows what you're feeling. Nobody knows what you're thinking. Reality doesn't know what you're trying to push upon it. So you have to project it out loud.
Right.
The importance of words.
Yes. And you can know anything you want to know. So as you're studying occultism, as you're studying mysticism, as you're studying whatever it is you want to study, well, then ask the questions. Ask when you get to a place what you want to know. I mean, that quote I read you with Einstein, I said, that's an interesting quote. What the heck did he mean by that? So I got on to ChatGPT and I said, explain this to me. and it explained it so frigging clear and well. I said, oh my God, I get that. And so, look, no matter where you get, no matter how far you go, we always have tools and we have the wherewithal to know the truth. And whether you want to pray to Jesus Christ or you want to ask a question to ChatGPT or you just want to be ask your own intuition, your own soul. We all have guides and teachers and angels cannot deny answering you. That's what most people don't understand about angels. They can't deny you. So people say, oh, I want this, I want that. And I said, well, they're going to give you want. So if you aren't going to be specific, don't ask.
And that's true with almost anything. You got to make sure that you word things properly and that you ask for exactly what you need and you don't ask for anything in overabundance, because otherwise, of course, it's going to come back and bite you in the ass, because that's how karma works.
Well, I mean, look, live in gratitude, chase your excitement, and follow your passions and let go of the outcome. I mean,
Ain't that the truth?
Maxwell Maltz wrote the book Psycho-Cybernetics, which is nothing more than visualizing what you want, work towards it every day with a positive attitude, and you create it. Well, you don't create it. Your mind creates it. Now, how beautiful is that?
I mean, simply just breaking it down, man. You can't ever actually create something unless you visualize it and actually put it into reality. But again, nothing is ever going to appear in reality unless you actually take the initiative to actually go forth and create it into reality.
Right.
So if you sit around waiting your entire life, waiting for somebody else to do something for you, it's never going to happen. This is where you get into the whole thing about being a man of action or being a person of action. You know, nothing is ever going to happen for you. Things are not going to happen unless you take the initiative to actually make them happen.
That's
subconsciously, mentally, and physically in the real world.
I mean, look at the opportunity you get when you get a major illness and you being told by every doctor known to man that there's nothing they can do. And yet people have healed themselves from those situations. Well, how is that? Because they started utilizing, I think it's Norman Shealy that started using, he was told that he was going to die within 24 hours. So he turned on comedy television and started laughing at all the comedies and come to discover that laughter is some of the most perfect medicine that you can have in your life. And he ultimately healed himself.
I mean, even look at that type of stuff that happens with plants. Have you ever seen the things where people will yell and say a bunch of profanities at water, and then in another cup of water, they'll sit there and talk about how much they love it, how beautiful it is, and they'll actually feed the plants with it, and one of them will end up looking like crap, and the other one will be fully flourish and look absolutely beautiful. Like, that just shows the power that even your words have within interacting with your environment. Like, this is something that even goes into some new age stuff about speaking your ideas into water and then consuming that water in order to put that energy back into you. Like, again, a reoccurring concept that you see in scientists or in science with practical use and within, you know, the occult / psychology, whatever way you kind of want to view the other realm of things. But, you know, you see it happen practically and you also see it happen spiritually.
That's a perfect analogy. Because everything is energy. Well, why wouldn't other energy? I mean, you know, when you get into quantum physics, a particle? Are you kidding me? A particle all across the trillions of light years from the universe, across this universe, understands what a particle here is going through? Are you kidding me? And you're going to worry about, and you're not going to be understanding of how your words and your thinking and your attitudes are going to affect your life and everybody else's life in the universe. I think it was, it was Christian Birdie said transformation starts with one. You transform you, and the whole universe transforms right along with you. So
everything tries to get back in sync with each other. So if you raise your elevation, everything wants to grab for that higher one.
Yeah, everybody thinks they got to be magic. It's not magic. It's just living normal, just being human, experiencing. We're a spiritual being experiencing a human experience. That's it. That's as difficult as it needs to be.
It's crazy how different life can be with just a changed perspective. The situations don't change, things don't necessarily change, but your entire life can feel changed simply with a different perspective.
Think of what I just said. You have no free will except the free will of attitude. Mm-hmm. I mean, what would your life be like? I ask this question a lot to a lot of my clients. I say, if I wiped out all of your past and you were left with what you are currently, all your talents, tools, and abilities, who would you be? And my favorite answer from one of my clients was, I'd be fantastic. I said, well, then wipe out your damn past.
You already had it within yourself.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be. It's gone. It isn't even real. You're making the crap up.
Well, I guess with that, of course, it might be a perfect spot to end the show with some words of wisdom. So, if there were some words of wisdom you might want to bestow on the listeners today, other than, of course, all of the fascinating words of wisdom you've been bestowing throughout the episode, what might it be?
I'm going to acquiesce to Ram Dass, and that was the great book back with us hippies, and it was "Be Here, Be Now." And I think that that's probably, uh, you know, live in joy, live in happiness, and live in opportunity to everything. We live in a simulation. That's the word I was looking for earlier. If we live in a simulation, we're living to experience specific experiences that help us become self realized. And if we live like that and be here now and let go of the past, don't worry about what maybe, might be, could be in the future, we can live very happy people, very happy lives, very enjoyable lives.
Say the only time that exists is the present because the future is just but an idea and the past is but a memory.
Right? There's nothing else. It's now. And I actually did that when I was thinking about that and processing that. I drove by a little inn that my wife and I met 30 years ago. And as I was driving by, I just started bringing back that whole memory. And then I NLP'd it by intensifying that memory to where all of my senses could feel like I was there doing it right then. And it's really amazing. I mean, I didn't anywhere come close to fully encapsulating it, so to speak, but I did sense that memory with being so powerful. And that's what happens to people when they go and look at the past and bring it into the future. They intensify that memory to make it real. But you can do that in a positive way too. And the positive way is to remembering the wonderful things in your life and experiencing them.
Ain't that the truth? That's weirdly enough, actually, something that has been going on with the past couple family members that have passed away. Rather than doing the typical funeral idea, what we end up doing is this celebration of life where we'll all get together and we'll talk about all the good times. We'll not talk about all the bad times. We'll talk about all the good memories. And in turn, it ends up being one of those things where you can take a painful memory and you turn it into something positive where, typically a funeral is something that you're always going to remember as a negative thing, but we've turned it into a thing where of course it's a sad moment, but it ends up turning into a good family moment because it turns into all of us just sitting and remembering the people that had passed on. So again, just a matter of changing perspective can make such a big difference, and being able to take these hurtful memories and actually shift them into something positive is definitely more beneficial than it is negative. Don't
It's
dwell
pretty
in the
good.
negative emotions. Try to dwell in the positive things that you can remember from the past.
It's pretty hard to remember those experiences and events of the past when you start thinking about them. I mean, when you get into something like that, um, you're thinking about the good things. The good experiences come up way predominantly more than the bad experiences. I mean, you can just let go of the negatives. They were just opportunities, and you grew from them, you learned from them. But the good memories are what is left. It's really interesting that you brought that up. I'm getting ready to bury my mother this Sunday, and we're having a celebration of life.
It's a beautiful thing because, like I said, it ends up making it so that you can choose to remember what you want to remember. Meaning that a lot of people, unfortunately, when somebody passes away, they remember those last moments with them in the hospital. But that isn't what you have to choose to remember. You can remember that person for who they were when they were fully vibrant, fully happy, fully doing their thing. And, you can let go of those hurtful memories and not dwell on them right in the end, but rather remember, again, their celebration of their life and all the positive things and not, the end moments that may not have been the best.
Well, I mean, she lived to be 92 years old.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful long life.
that was that was a long one.
A lot of good memories, though. That's probably the positive about it. There's a lot of good stuff to remember.
and it was just a lot of good experiences, and it was it takes a real soldier to soldier through 92 years. I promise you. I told her many times. I said, "I'm getting old, Mother." She says, "What do you mean? I'm 92. You ain't that old yet." I said, "I don't even want to be 92."
Age is but a number, right?
Yeah. Until you get that old and it's more than a number. It's a hard life. But yeah, so I understand that. I agree with that. And I'm looking forward to having this celebration for her. And I've done a lot of studies on that transition. So, that's a pretty wonderful experience.
Well, if anybody wanted to possibly look into all of your work, all of your fascinating things that you dive into, possibly even set up a session with you to possibly start diving into their subconscious, where can people come and find your work? Where can they find your books? And where can they come and contact you?
They can get my book, Soul Fusion Healing, Integrating Body, Mind, and Soul, from Amazon. I have 3 websites. My hypnosis website is betterlifehypnosis.com. My astrology that I've been doing for 50 years is astromarv.com. And soulfusionhealing.com is the short clip on my book. And you can certainly reach me from all 3 of those sites. And the book is just a compendium of everything that I've studied and learned and experienced.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today, share all of your experiences, all of your different research into all of these different fascinating things. And I'm hoping at some point in the future we can do this again, because I feel like there's still a lot of different fascinating stuff we can still chat about.
I think Shayn, or is it Sean? I think
Shayn.
Shayn, you and I could have conversations for days. We might even find something we could disagree on.
See, that's the problem with these hour and a half podcasts, is that there's so many different things you could talk about. You never know what direction you end up wanting to go. So you end up touching base on all of these different things. But because of that, it ends up opening new doors for new conversations in the future, because you kind of tread the waters a little bit, see what you can get into. But then the following time, you can really start to dive deep into certain different concepts. So...
Well, I honor what you do, and many blessings to you. And I thank you for who you are, what you're learning, and how you're sharing it, especially.
Well, thank you so much. I say the same to you and your research. You're doing some awesome work, and I hope you continue on doing your work and helping out a lot of individuals that it seems like you're helping out along your way and along your path with all of this research. Because as you were kind of mentioning a little bit earlier, all of this information doesn't do anything if you're not putting it into practical use. So I'm glad that there's at least some people out there that are taking the time to do this research and not just hoarding it for themselves, but actually putting it into practical use for themselves and also for others.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's probably one of the greatest lessons I ever learned, was when he said that. Walk the talk or throw. He actually said, throw the shit away. I try to clean it up, because I try to be a little bit clean. But walking the talk is the best thing you can do in your life.
As everybody's heard when they were kids, actions speak louder than words.
Yep.